Hello, Renegade marketers. Welcome to Renegade Marketers Unite, the top-rated podcast for B2B CMOs and other marketing-obsessed individuals. You're about to listen to a recording of Renegade Marketers Live, our live show featuring the CMOs of CMO Huddles, a community that's sharing, caring, and daring each other to greatness every day of the week. This episode is homing in on what it means to be a startup CMO with Allyson of TrustRadius and Ajay Khanna of Explorium. Two, you guessed it, startup CMOs with a whole lot of insightful things to say about a marketing challenge that is entirely different from CMOing at an established company. Tune in to learn what makes CMOing at a startup so exciting, how to build a winning team and marketing strategy, and so much more. Okay, let's get to the episode. I can't wait for you to listen. And of course, if you enjoy this episode, hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share at least one chapter of my new book, Renegade Marketing, 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands. And here's the show. Hello, I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio in NYC. Whether you're in Silicon Valley, New York City, Silicon Alley, or in Israel, Silicon Wadi, new companies are hatched literally on a daily basis. Most of these die before their third birthday and before reaching 100 employees. Those that do get this far set their sights on new milestones, aiming for, say, 100 million annual average revenue, otherwise known as ARR, an important word in all of this conversation, enabled by large funding rounds. Being the head of marketing at this stage is, in a word, challenging. The expectations that marketing can work miracles are high. The resources marketers are given are low. It's a tightrope that takes courage and skill to cross successfully. To truly understand the perils and joys of being a startup CMO, we have two special guests who have taken very different paths, but now find themselves in similar positions. With that, let's welcome Allyson, Vice President of Marketing at TrustRadius. First off, Allyson, you are the only marketing chief I've ever interviewed who spent 2 years out of college teaching dance in Abu Dhabi. There's got to be a story there.
Yeah, I lived out in the UAE for 2 years, dancing out there and teaching ballet, tap, and jazz. And so it was really fun, really great experience. But knew eventually I would come back to California, where I'm originally from the Bay Area. So I knew I was always going to come home eventually.
Very cool. So how did you make the transition to LiveRamp?
So I moved back to San Francisco. I knew I wanted to start getting into the tech scene. It was really kind of blossoming back in 2013. And so I randomly got placed at LiveRamp. I was hired as a kind of Swiss Army knife, and I was doing, anything from front office work to working with our recruiting team, pretty much anything that needed to get done. I was kind of that person. And then we made one of our first marketing leadership hires, and she brought me on to the marketing team where I really started to hone in my skills and learn from her. So it was kind of a different path, and really happy. I started there when it was about like 40 people. So kind of the early days.
Was Rebecca Stone there?
Yeah. So Rebecca Stone was the leader that brought me on to marketing.
Got it. I got it. No, and she's terrific. It's funny. We met when she was still at LiveRamp. It's been, you were there, you've been there or there almost 8 years, which is really unusual in Silicon Valley. And I'm just curious, what kept you there for so long? And then what made you decide it was time to leave?
So I think, there's two things that just happened in parallel. I think LiveRamp was going through, hyper growth. We went through many stages of a company, right? So when I started, about 9 months later, we were acquired. Once we were acquired, we were a subsidiary of a larger company. We were able to acquire companies, have this hyper growth, and then we actually divested our parent company and IPO'd, and then continued growth. And so this whole kind of like interesting trajectory of the company. And then I was given a ton of opportunity to learn and grow under Rebecca Stone. And so I think I found myself in this perfect pocket of growth in the company, and marketing was a huge component of that. And so I think when you find yourself at, a really great company that's also investing in you and your growth, it's really easy to stay. And then all of a sudden 8 years kind of flies by and you're like, whoa, what happened? And
Well, and it's interesting because in CMO huddles, we're talking a lot right now about retention.
mhm,
And I know a lot of CMOs would love to be able to keep their staff that long. And so it sounds like a combination of they just kept throwing new challenges at you. So you were learning the whole time. You had a good relationship with your senior executives, and they were in some ways looking out for you. And the other part of it is since you were at a startup and it
mhm.
had so many iterations, I feel like you went through a lifetime in 8 years of the different kinds of startup experiences, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really lucky. And you're right. Like you learn so much along the way. And I think I was, not only did I have a great relationship with the executives and given a lot of opportunity, but I feel like the team that surrounded me was also just very, very impressive. Everybody at LiveRamp was and still is very, very intelligent people, but also very humble, very collaborative. And so it was all of those things kind of combined. And so it kept me there for a very long time.
And one thing I would imagine, you really learned the tech stack. You really learned demand gen, because that is one thing that, I mean, Rebecca really takes a lot of, when she talks about her live ramp experience, building up that muscle, if you will, for live ramp was
Yeah.
her sort of key accomplishment, right?
Yes, yes. The demand gen function was something that we built from day one, right? We really started with the fundamentals. We had a lot of investment in our marketing operation. We had a lot of investment in making sure we had all the fundamentals to build the demand gen engine. And she did a really, really good job. And so a big part of my job now, right, is taking that demand gen kind of functionality and taking it to another company. And so I have a lot to owe to Rebecca and teaching me all of that goes into a really good sound demand gen strategy.
What made you decide it was time to leave?
I think, it was a combination of my desire to lead an entire marketing team and to continue to grow. At LiveRamp, even though I had tons of opportunity, I was ready to kind of go back and lead an entire marketing team because I only was managing a portion of it. And so that was one thing. And then I really missed the startup life. I missed the days that I was kind of like, in the trenches with the sales team. I knew every salesperson's name. I really miss that kind of camaraderie. So it was a combination of like my own personal growth that I was looking for in my career, but also the type of company that I was looking for as well.
So you seek out the smaller company, the startup mode, and some might describe you as a glutton for punishment, but it's important in this conversation to know what you like. So just give us a quick window into what's going on with you at TrustRadius. How far are you into that? And we'll dive deeper in a bit, but give us a picture of the landscape for now, or your challenges.
So I was brought on to the team to really rebuild marketing, and so I've just made it through my first quarter, which was really exciting. And we did, and it was really about honestly turning on the lights. Like we did very basic, database marketing. We're working with the BDRs, doing some paid, like very basic paid media, but it was just really like the main thing is rebuilding the whole team. And so we're still in the process of that, but we have like some core function in terms of our demand gen engine that are actually working right now, that kind of give us that breathing room, that kind of not even a quick win, right? It took us a whole quarter to build that, but we also now we have that breathing room to one build off of, right, and to continue to grow our team, continue to kind of grow our contribution to the company, because I really want this marketing team to be a growth engine for TrustRadius. And so that's really what we're working on right now. But we're definitely in a building phase. If I had one sentence, that's what it would be.
All right. All right. Well, building it is then.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's bring on Ajay Khanna, who is the CMO of Explorium. Hello,
Hi,
Ajay.
Drew.
How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Good. Thank you for waiting patiently in the semi-green room.
Yes, yes.
So you've worked at a number of startups from Savion, Viva, and Reltio. So what keeps attracting you to this world versus a big company like Oracle, which only got a year of your time?
Yes, of course, there's a story behind that. But as you said, like glutton for punishment, right? But no, so you can call me like builder at heart, right? I think that is where the crux is, and that's what I really enjoy doing. So this is the fourth time I'm kind of like building the marketing marketing organization, and this whole idea of like building the teams, building the processes, building and experimenting with the new and latest tech stacks. That is really really exciting. Exciting is the overall speed and the pace that you work with and all the learnings that come along the way. So that is really fascinating. And then you get to kind of like start with this empty canvas. You write the whole story. So overall I think that is the place that I always wanted to be, and then I have done that thing again and again, and it is like where I belong, and it's really exciting for me.
Well, it's good to know exactly what you're good at and what you like. There's no doubt about it, because it's such a challenge anyway. So you know exactly what you're getting into. And I'm curious, you've done this 4 times, but I'm imagining at Explorium, it's a bit different than it was at some of the others. Talk a little bit about how you're looking at this one. Obviously, you're bringing a great deal of confidence into this, but how do
Mhm.
you make sure, like, one of the things that where CMOs often struggle is setting expectations with their CEO and getting those sort of, here's what we can do in year 1 and year 2 and year 3. Talk a little bit about how you've approached this job, maybe in a way that was a little different than in the past.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because throughout this journey, you learn a lot of things and then you become wiser. And then the whole idea is that we want to kind of like bring in focus within the company. We want to make sure that everybody is aligned. And then the way I started this particular role was just to speak with people, more and more people. So I kind of like spent my first month and a half to speak with as many people as I could. I spent like 1 hour listening to people from each and every person in sales, each and every person in solution side, each and every person in like your customer success teams, in finance, so that you can really kind of like make sure that you are getting input from all sides. You have enough information to really understand what this company is about, what are the focus areas where you want to bring in alignment, as well as start building that whole message and story about that company. So spending that time just to having that conversation, I had like 40 plus conversations before I started doing anything, and have those like very method around that structured discussions that you're having with the product teams and everyone, so that you can take your notes and then start building your plans which is right for that company. There is no cookie cutter, there is no like one size fits all approach in marketing, and the initial phase of this knowledge capture, knowledge gathering, that is really critical.
I love this. It's, 40 interviews is a lot. What you're also saying to your employees and your associates is that you're important. I need to know what you
Absolutely.
know in order to be able to be better at what I
What
do.
works, what
I
doesn't work, yes.
All of these things, I just wonder, you sort of bring a certain framework and a frame of mind as a marketer, having done it. What do they call that? It's where you're searching for the answers that you will fit into your model, a certain bias. What do you do to make sure? And I'm not very good at that, by the way. I am really good at getting the research, to confess. But how do you go into this and make sure that you're having 40 interviews, but you're really hearing with fresh ears and a fresh mind?
Exactly. I think that is the whole idea of doing those interviews in like very first days before you are actually like part of the system, so to speak, right? So where the biases are not already there. So you want to kind of like make sure and ask the right questions, right? What is this company about, right? What are the things that are working? What are the things that are not working? What are our challenges? What are our opportunities? What are our threats? Who our competition is? Who do you think our buyer is? How do you speak about this company? These are like very basic questions. But when you start diving into these, you start seeing that okay, maybe there is a little bit alignment here, maybe there is a little bit disconnect here. So you start building your marketing plan to find those right gaps and start from there. So doing that right away when you start this new role is important, because if you do this thing like 6 months down the line, that okay, I'm starting a project of new positioning and I start asking these questions, then there will be a lot more bias in what you're asking and what you're listening and what you're building. So it's important to do this upfront.
Yeah, and I remember the term, it's cognitive bias, which is not a buzzword, by the way, just in case they're playing buzzword bingo at home. We've done the tour, which is really important, but I can also see the sort of CEO tapping his fingers or the head of sales tapping their fingers, say, okay, great, you've done 40 interviews. Now, when am I going to see results? And I'm wondering how you manage expectations in these scenarios.
In my particular situation, it was kind of like guidance from our CEO as well as our management team as well, is that okay, take your time. This is a marathon, this is not a sprint. Don't try to do everything on the day one. Don't try to make all those changes. And there are like some guidelines, books like for your first 100 days kind of a thing, right? It gives you some kind of roadmaps. Even in from a last company, there were like, when new kind of like executive joins, there is an expectation that they will be spending their first 30 days, 45 days about learning. They are not going to take any action. So once you set that expectation right up front, it makes it kind of like easier for everybody to kind of like get aligned with those.
First 90 Days is such a good book. And by the way, I think it's a leadership book. I don't think it's about 90 days. I think if you follow what they preach, it's really some smart stuff in there. And of course, I've recommended it a ton of times to CMOs who are getting started. I'm wondering if the fact that Explorium was founded in Israel, but is now headquartered in Silicon Valley, does it bring a little different spice to the table?
So interestingly, Explorium was not the first Israeli company I worked for. My first one was Amdocs. Actually, there where my career actually software kind of like started, where I started with like product design and then user experience design and moved into product management. Before I moved into marketing, I spent almost like 5 years there, and that was one of the largest IT company. It still is. I think it is. It is like $10 billion plus revenue. It's like really large IT company. But now the startup scene is really so vibrant. There is so many interesting and fascinating startups coming from there, whether those are like data startups like Explorium, or it startups around like MS, startups around like security, DevOps, fintech. There is so much happening, and they're like much more closer to Silicon Valley than kind of like traditional older companies like Amdocs. I really like love the kind of like passion that they bring to whole startup scene, the speed and the pace that they work with, and
Yeah.
this whole hyper growth mindset. That is so fascinating. I really enjoy being part of that kind of environment.
Yeah, we had the good fortune at Renegade to work with Riskified, which ended up and went public. But I got to go when it was our first 30 days. I got to go to Israel pre-pandemic and interview not only the leaders but also their customers, and it was just a great experience. And you feel the energy.
Feel the energy.
It's really incredible. Okay, let's bring Allyson back. One of the things that I wanted to sort of get into is you both started after the pandemic began, and that changes things. I mean, it really is. You don't meet your team. So all these interviews, Ajay, that you described, you did virtually, I'm guessing.
All of them.
So first of all, have you met any of all your team members?
Very recently, a month back, I did my first team meeting here in the Bay Area, and right after that, we had our first management meeting, which was face to face. Otherwise, everything was virtual. But yes, finally.
Amazing. And how about you, Allyson?
Yeah, I'm actually in Austin right now. So TrustRadius is based in Austin and I'm based in San Francisco. So I've been out here, I think 3 or 4 times, and I usually come out for about a week. So I've met the rest of the executive team, a lot of the team members, and then the marketing team as well. So I've been really lucky, and I feel like we're starting towards like hopefully the end of this pandemic, right? Hopefully people can start going back to their offices and stuff. So continue that, building that camaraderie.
Yeah, it's sort of funny because in our huddles conversation, I only know of one company that brought everybody back or asked them
Mhm,
all, and they ended up losing a huge
mhm, mhm.
percentage. So I don't know. I don't see necessarily folks coming back to the office in mass anytime soon. There's a good chunk of people who like working at home. Anyway, you both had to build teams and
Mhm.
hire people. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, and now we're in the middle of the great resignation. Talk about how this changed the nature of your challenge and what you've been doing either to keep employees or to go find the new ones?
Yeah, I think we have had this discussion few times during our hurdles as well, right? So this is on top of mind for all marketing executives around building the teams, especially during the startup, during this kind of like pandemic phase. And I think it is about like continuously kind of looking for talent, continuously seeing that what are the types of people that you want to kind of like really bring on board, and having very clear ideas and definitions around the people, the culture, the fit, as well as the skill set that you want to bring in. So more clarity you have, the kind of like people you want, the better they will be successful in the organization, and they will be kind of like be happy and they will stay longer. So I think that is starting from like having very clear idea on what are the kind of people and the skill set you want to bring when you're building the marketing team. I think that is very critical.
So I'm hearing you talking, and at the same time, I'm listening to all of these CMOs saying, "Yeah, but you got to get offers out there quickly." And this other part of the question that I keep asking is, what is culture without office? And Allyson, I'm just curious. You're building a team. What kinds of things were you doing during the pandemic? And now you've been first quarter, you had to hire people, and you got to get them excited. What is culture right now?
I think it's actually, when you think about culture, I think about the values of the company. So one thing at TrustRadius is that we have very clear values and what that means. And so when you start a company and you align yourself to those values and those resonate with you, right, that makes it much easier to kind of buy into like the mission and the vision and what you're really trying to accomplish. And I think specifically for my team, because we're rebuilding and TrustRadius without a marketing leader for some time, when I came in with very like clear, like this is our goal, this is what we're going to accomplish, this is what we're going to do together, and kind of rallied around that. Because at the end of the day, people want to see that North Star, they want to get to that goal, and you want to keep them really focused on that, and that really motivates people. So I think two things, like if you have those values and people really align to them, then it makes them want to stay at that company, right? And they also have to see like a clear path to like, okay, I'm going to achieve these goals. And that's also personal growth for themselves. So I think if you kind of have a nice combination of that, this kind of hybrid work situation is going to be successful for companies.
All right. So we've got clear values, very clear goal, maybe a single-minded goal, and showing how the path and the contribution that that individual can make. Ajay, anything else that we can do in this area to build culture? In the old days, yeah, you could say, I want this kind of talent. I have this kind of budget. You could, see 10 candidates and you could interview them. We get 10 people to interview. Now it's like you got to meet the one you want and you got to make an offer really fast. I mean, and that changes this situation a little bit. And your team wants huge raises.
It is, and it's not as well, right? I mean, culture, first of all, is like how close you are with your team, right? And making sure that you are speaking with your team very often, right? I mean, you have like face-to-face meetings, whether it is on Zoom, you need to have them often. You need to make sure that, as Allyson mentioned, that there are clear goals defined, and why do you believe that you can meet those goals, and why have we defined those goals, and what is the math, or what is the kind of like really reasoning behind those goals. Once the team understands that, that kind of like, for me, that builds the culture, that builds the transparency and the belief that, okay, we are going to meet those goals, right? So that is really important. And on the second part around like really the hiring part, you want to make sure that you are getting the right people in, right? So that is more important. So yes, you need to move fast. So the whole process needs to be like more efficient, but that does not mean that we don't have the right descriptions, right skill set, everything defined, and we kind of like pull the trigger just because we have a warm body kind of like coming in. So I think that can be more harmful than doing good. So make sure that your hiring process is very efficient, but make sure that you clearly know why you're hiring this person, what is the gap they're going to fill, and what is the role they're going to perform.
Okay, so I think my takeaway from that is it's the same basics that we had pre-pandemic, only accelerated, which is kind of a little, a little tricky wrinkle. But I would guess, and I wonder if this is true, that there is still kind of some sex appeal to being at a startup. And I mean, Allyson, you specifically like that, like being at a smaller company. And I imagine the people that you're hiring also get excited about that. Now, here's the question that goes with that. startups are not famous for work-life balance. Gen Z are famous for asking about work-life balance. What are you doing in that with the startup is like, oh, all in, all consuming. And there is a generation here that says, yeah, that's nice, but how many hours a week do I really have to work? I'm just curious how you're thinking about balance on your team.
So I think it goes back to like what I was saying, like, hey, here's our clear goal. This is what we need to get done. And letting people kind of have the flexibility of how are you going to achieve that, right? And so you would actually be really surprised with like your team and the creative, innovative things that they could come up with. And so I think it's like you have a clear goal, but you're letting people figure out how to get to that goal and helping them along the way, coaching them along the way, getting out roadblocks and whatever that, right? That it's their time. So they have to figure it out. And I really leave that up to my team and give them that flexibility. And that's why also you join a startup, right? Is because you have that flexibility to kind of create your own path to reach that goal. But I think the other thing too is that when you're at a startup, your time to impact should be really, really short because you can get in there, you can sink your teeth into projects and take ownership of that and really have an impact in a short amount of time, which I think if you think about that, a lot of the like millennials and Gen Z, right? That's what they want to do. They want to have the impact in the shortest amount of time.
I love that. I that's a great way of thinking about it. Time to impact. And that is one of the things that is truly a benefit of working at a smaller company because you do one good thing, it can have a huge impact. All right, we're going to take a quick sort of break, but not really, because I'm going to plug CMO Huddles for a second. Launched in 2020, CMO Huddles is an invitation-only subscription service that brings together an elite group of CMOs to share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described Huddles as timely conversations with smart peers in a trusted environment, while another called it a cross between an expert workshop and a therapy session. If you're a B2B CMO that can share, care, and dare with the best of them, visit cmohuddles.com or send me an email, drew@renegade.com, to see if you qualify for a guest pass. Ajay, Allyson, you're both relatively new to CMO Huddles. How's the experience been so far for you?
Oh, it's been amazing. It's been amazing. So this is like some of the most fascinating people that I've met, where you can really discuss your challenges, discuss what are the different tactics or strategies various your peers and colleagues are taking in their companies. And it is not just about the frequent huddle meetings. I have been contacting them like off those huddles and having one-on-one meetings with them, picking their brains around like organization, around like marketing stacks, and it is just invaluable what you get out of these connections. It's amazing.
I love that. And Allyson, I know you're just like almost it's as soon as you got this new job, but tell me, any thoughts so far?
Yeah, it's been really nice the opportunity to meet people one-on-one because I do think like in the group settings and chatting with others, it's one nice to know that people have like the same problems as you do and you're like not alone, right? So it's easy to feel like that, especially as a marketing leader. But I really like being set up with people that either have expertise in a certain area that I want to learn more about and having that one-on-one time with them, or if I can provide that expertise and have that one-on-one time with them. And I think that's just super valuable, kind of that matchmaking with CMOs and to exchange information.
I love it. Let's talk a little bit about marketing. And this startups have, I think, this fail fast mentality, which gives you, the marketing chief, this is in theory, the latitude to experiment. Is that true?
I would say yes, but in moderation, right? Like I think you need to have the fundamentals in place to before you start doing a lot of different testing. And so that's something I think about a lot is that, hey, let's just get the fundamentals right and let's start proving that those things work. And once that gets going, then you need to start testing of like how are you going to kind of keep feeding that demand gen engine? How are you going to keep widening the top of the funnel? How are you going to think about the bottom funnel, all of that, et cetera. But if you don't have the fundamentals in place, like you really shouldn't be doing too much testing and hopefully not too much failing either, right?
Interesting. Ajay, what do you think?
Yes, so I think I do agree that we must have those fundamentals right around the processes and some of the basic things that we need around like integration and the stack. But yes, I think experiment will be key, because if you see there are like so many tactics, strategies, as well as like technology available, the tech stack, if you see there are like 5,000, maybe more marketing technologies available there. So there is no one size fits all, right? So you need to find what is the right thing that you need for that particular company, for product, for that marketing, for that market, as well as for the marketing motions that you're using, right? Whether it is like waterfall, or is it like ABM, or is it like PLG motion. So you need to say that, okay, what will fit best in this situation. And what I believe in, and I really really encourage my team to think like, is that it is about like progress over perfection, right? Experiment, move on, but you have to move on, right? Trying to make things perfect does not work in kind of like startup. We need to show the progress day after day, week after week, month after month, quarter after quarter. And as long as you are moving in the right direction, experimentation is all good.
I love that expression, progress over perfection. And I'm wondering what's that look like for you, Ajay? What does that really mean? Is it all about opportunities in pipeline? I mean, what is progress in your case?
Yes, KPS could be, at the end of the day, it is opportunities in the pipeline. It is about the revenue. It is about the ARR, right? And then how are you kind of like driving the overall marketing motion, your channels, your mixing, your programs, your GTMs to that end goal. So that is always there. So the progress is definitely seeing at the end how it is impacting the end goal. But even at a smaller kind of like a level, you want to see that, okay, what is the progress on your website, right? How is the progress on your lead gen? What is the progress on your SEOs? What is the progress you are making along your even AR and PR kind of a thing? So everything needs to be moving along, right? So they need to kind of like move along in the right direction. And then at the end goal is that, okay, you are measuring the end impact on the pipeline and impact on your sales. So that needs to show. So that is what progress is.
So I'm curious because both of you describe a demand gen motion, if you will, that is very common in Silicon Valley. And it's sort of this is the playbook. And I'm just wondering at what point is there a little bit of ingenuity to make up for the small budget? Because you're not dealing with a lot of dollars, is my guess. And I'm just wondering if you have an example that either of you could share that's sort of delivering for you that in a way. And I know, Allyson, you're only in it 3 months. So, but where's the ingenuity here? Or is it really just about, blocking and tackling?
I think the ingenuity comes from the messaging and the narrative, right? If you have really strong narrative, and if you even take a step back, right? A lot of technology if you're coming from like a SaaS business, right? A lot of that's being commoditized. And so you're not going to win by this feature versus another feature, right? Because then your competitor is just going to build that feature. Where the ingenuity is coming from is the story that you tell to the market, and doing that in a really consistent way, and how you get that message out there, right? You can have like everybody has like the same channel mix. The B2B playbook is pretty straightforward. And so I think really the ingenuity comes from the messaging and the story that you tell.
That's music to my ears, and I'm believing it. Ajay, what do you think of that?
That is definitely really really important, right? Having that narrative right, making sure that your messaging is kind of like resonating. Everybody is able to articulate your position, your messaging, and then it flows through various pieces in your content, from your sales side, from your messaging side, from your website. That is really really important. And then when it comes to the budget, look, I mean, you will never have enough budget, right? Because whatever budget you get, you will be asked to do more than that budget can do. At that point, you need to understand that how different motions work, how different channels work, right? Because tactics and the channels, they will bring in things with the different quality, things of like they will convert at different ratios, they will convert at different paces. So once you start understanding those levers, that okay, this motion will kind of like either generate more or generate better quality or generate faster or convert faster, then you can kind of like pull those levers and maximize whatever your budget is. So getting that understanding is really important. And it is always like, I mean, you are like building to kind of like deliver today but also kind of like grow tomorrow, right? So you have to kind of maintain that mix and use that budget so that it is not just for like today but also like you are building for tomorrow as well.
I'm curious with your situation, because you did the month of listening. At some point, you said, okay, here's what we're going to do. When do you get the chance to say, you know what, I don't think we're talking about our business quite right. We need to really think through what our brand stands for. At what point do you, at a startup, because, you know, there's so many, and both of you talked about building this sort of muscle of demand generation, which is what investors are looking for, which is what, you know, maybe the CEO and the CFO is looking. But there is this story that you both talked about that needs to be on the top. When do you get the chance to have that conversation at one point? And Ajay, you've been at Explorium longer, so you could talk about that.
It is at Explorium as well as in my previous companies, right? And what I'm trying to kind of like say here is it is never done, right? You will always be asking that question, that what your messaging and positioning and branding is today. 2 years down the line, you will have to rethink that. 4 years down the line, you will have to rethink that again, because market has changed, your customers have changed, maybe you have pivoted to a different vertical, maybe you have product has evolved, right? So you have to kind of like ask that question regularly, like, I mean, every 6 months and every year, and maybe every year and a half, you will start thinking that, okay, do we need to kind of like really reposition ourselves, do we need to rebrand ourselves, what is marketing looking for? And at even my last company, we did like 3 times, or at least 2.5 times, to keep pace with the market, or not to keep pace with the market, to outgrow the market, right? Because that's how you do it. So it is a regular iterative process.
Are either of your companies what some people would call purpose driven? Is there a clear articulation of purpose in terms of why the company exists? Allyson, are you, I mean, again, 3 months, it's very
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah, but I think that we have a clear purpose at TrustRadius, right? We want, like, the way software is bought today is not the way it's going to be bought in the future. And so when you think about the future of review sites, are really turning into like these research tools for buyers. And so, you know, our purpose, right, is to really aid the buyer to make the best purchase decision they can when it comes to technology for their business. And the fact that I've only been there for a quarter, and I can clearly articulate that means that we're very purpose driven.
And Ajay,
Yes, the core idea that kind of like brought me to this company and really attracts a lot of people and the new employees to the company is this whole idea around that we are bringing the whole world's data together, right? We are connecting the data, and that make building this platform, which we is like external data cloud, where you can get world's best data. So what we are building is like what Google is to internet, Explorium is to data. So that whole value, that big goal that we have, that aspirational thing, that we are the one who are going to bring all this data together into a single platform, that is massive, and that is like so exciting.
wow. Okay, that's a big purpose. That is, because there's a lot of data out there. Everybody has it and they don't know what to do with it. Okay, so that is a perfect transition, because in this show at about this moment, I ask, what would Ben Franklin say? And I know that's random, but there's a reason. He was America's first chief marketing officer. He sold a revolution to a king. That's what you're talking about is easy compared to what he had to do. Anyway, here's what he would
Trivial.
say. We make these times better if we bestir ourselves. And that, in one way, is sort of why we wanted to talk about purpose, because that is really what bestir ourselves means. All right. We are getting closer to the end of this conversation. And for some folks who are thinking about going to the startup, give me 3 top challenges, what it means to be the head of marketing, the 3 top ones.
So when I think about the challenges that I'm facing, it's really balancing the short-term goals and long-term goals, right? There's things that you need to do right now and achieve to keep the lights on, but you really need to make sure that it's laddering into like that long-term goal that you're trying to accomplish. We've talked about this a lot, but it's around, I mean, the biggest challenge also is around prioritization, right? Everything needed to be done last week, the month before, like you're always kind of working at a deficit. So it's really hard to make sure that you're prioritizing properly. to reach those goals, whether they're short-term or long-term. And you're also aligning on those as well across the company, because you don't want people going in different directions, right? So you really need to align on the prioritization across departments. And then the last thing that we've been also talking about is resourcing properly. Like, you just don't want to throw warm bodies and money at problems without really good process in place, really good, clear goals, clear action plan, etc. So I think resourcing properly, with a strapped budget, with strapped headcount, all of that, you really want to make sure that you're investing in the right areas.
Those are such great points. And I wish I'd started the show with those because so we've got the challenge of balancing short and long term. Makes total sense. And I talk a lot about in the book that, as a CMO, when you get that job, you need some quick wins. And so there's that short term, and that quick win will buy you the long term. The prioritization, man, and making sure that there's alignment against priorities. I would say CEO needs to help there.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard though, because startup CEOs are often better engineers than they are leaders. So that's a challenge. And then resourcing properly. Obviously, you got to have the right players, the right team underneath you to make this work. Ajay, what we miss here in the challenges?
I think a lot of them are same, right? I mean, like building for delivering today and like building for tomorrow, that is a big one. So like, I mean, I always say that, I mean, you are coming on like this rocket ship, right? But you will be building the rocket ship while you're flying it, right? So make sure that you understand that. And this whole idea of like progress over perfection, make sure that you understand that you're delivering something today and then building for tomorrow, right? I think that is really important. Second thing, challenge is that things will change. Things will, for sure, they will change. Your messaging will change. You will uncover new things. Your product will evolve. Your market will evolve. You will change directions around verticals. Your user persona will change. So make sure that you have that mindset to kind of like pivot fast, so that don't get like really paralyzed by that. Okay, things are changing, because that's what startup is. You will find your story as you're writing that story, right? So understand that part. And then the third one is don't be scared of failure, right? There will be failures, that is given. And by the nature of the business that you are getting into, there won't be much safety nets, right? It is not like 300% marketing organization that they're like people who are checking and cross-checking the work. It is you and maybe like two other people, and if it bombs, right? And you start all over again. So so don't be scared of failure. The thing is that, okay, learn from it and come back stronger.
Live to fight another day. I love that. And, people talk about, building a plane, but you're talking about building a rocket ship. And I think if you are at a startup, you really are thinking about how do we get to that unicorn status. So that's important. And you got to like that. I love this notion of flexibility. I was thinking of the days when I was a tennis player, and you approach the net and you do it in such a way that you land like your toes or sort of can go right or left at any moment. And I feel like that flexibility, being able to pivot, feels really smart. At the same time, as you're talking about that, it's like, you still got to have a core strategy, right? You still have to have a clear objective. So this pivoting is tricky. And then there's no safety net. I get it. And that's an upside and a downside. And I just want to make sure we're driving this sort of clear picture. What's the best part of all this for you? Is it that moment where the IPO and the stock goes out? I mean, what's the upside for being the head of marketing at a startup?
I really think it's about the people. I love knowing everybody by their first name. So I think there's like that human element of it that makes it all worth it. I do think that there is that level that I was kind of talking about of that time to impact is really short. And if you really like that, like this is the place to be. A startup is exactly where you can take on projects and really run with it. And also, I think if you really want to grow, right? Like there's so much that I've learned in the last quarter that I wouldn't have learned if I had stayed at LiveRamp and kind of stayed in I had a really great role, but it's getting yourself out of that comfort zone and really pushing yourself and challenging yourself. So you get to grow, you get to have a ton of impact, and you get to be really human you get to know everybody by their first name and something personal about them and create some really long lasting relationships.
Cool. I love all the humanness of this. Ajay, give us some of are we cashing in here at some point? I mean, because I gotta believe that you're not putting in these kinds of hours over and over again because the stress has got to be high.
And I will tell you, Drew, that if that is the focus of cashing out, you will be even more stressed. So
Mhm.
I think that is not something that I really think about, but it is that whole journey, right? That thrill of building, and just for the kind of like reason of building something new. I think that is really more important. If you keep on thinking about that, okay, when will there be going to be an exit? It's going to be an IPO, blah blah blah. I mean, then things become like much more miserable, I would say. So you need to enjoy the whole journey itself. I think that is really important. You need to enjoy learning new things. That is really important. And what kind of Allyson mentioned, that this whole idea of like building these long lasting relationships, you become like sisters and brothers in arms, right? It is not about colleagues. You are like that band of brothers, right? I mean, who are kind of like going to war and like having like scars to show to each other. And those are like lifelong relationships. All the kind of like companies I have joined in the past and all the startups, I mean, they are still friends. We still kind of like meet at Christmases and Thanksgiving and exchange gifts. They're for life. They're for life. And that's the best part.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about something that came up in a huddle, that if you really, and this may be the answer to a question I asked earlier, when you're looking to build a culture and you have to, this remote thing, is give everybody a really hard challenge, even if it's off, nothing to do with a company, but that they have to do together. That there's something about overcoming a hard challenge, even if it's a nonprofit off hours activity. If it's really easy, like going on a sailboat, they'll have a good time, but they won't bond the same way that if they had to sail the sucker. Right? Yeah. I mean, if they really had to, or do something challenging. So I think that inherent in being at a startup is you have these things. All right. We're getting to the point where we need some final words of wisdom from you two. Other words of wisdom. We got a CMO audience. Help them feel good about this. And here's the scenario. They're about to leave a big company where they had a big staff and a big budget. We know some of those CMOs, and they've left that to go to a 100-person startup. Give them some advice.
Keep learning. You will learn a lot of new things. Be open to that. There will be failures. You will recover from them. You will move forward. So don't be scared of that. And then again, progress over perfection. Keep moving.
I love it. Yes, we've come back to that. Progress over perfection. And okay, Allyson, last words.
I think it's really aligning your marketing strategy to the company goals and continuing to communicate that and the progress that you are making, right? So I think one big thing that CMOs forget is communicating out all the amazing work that you're doing. And even one thing is worth communicating to the company, because everyone's so excited about it and they're so excited about marketing. And so if you align it to the company objective and you clearly communicate how you're making progress on that, it'll really help you.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's one other thing in the virtual world. And I think that came up in a huddle where a CMO started to send a weekly, almost water cooler like conversation of things that they had heard from the executive team or others. And it's a way of communicating and bringing everybody together, because you're not together. So, all right. Well, thank you, Allyson and Ajay. You guys are great sports. I really appreciate you being on this. Thank you, audience, for staying with us. Okay, cue the music. Renegade Marketers Live is produced by Melissa Caffrey. Our botanical expert is Nicole Hernandez. Our intern is Alex Smith. For show notes, past episodes, and the latest on my new book, Renegade Marketing 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands, please visit renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser. And until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.